a
This
number of years. And
conference will
so
now be recorded.
there. And so who may be familiar with Place Matters, but we also have some on the call who are not familiar with Place Matters. And so I want to give you all an overview of what our place-based initiative Place Matters looks like at United Way of Forsyth County. And so my name is Rod Smith. Excuse me, I'm Director of Place-Based Initiatives at United Way of Forsyth County. I've been with the agency now for a little more than a year and a half. Um, Still relatively new to United Way, but not to the people and the community of Winston-Salem. And so for a number of years, I worked at the health department in a number of different capacities, the last of which was Director of Coalitions and Community Engagement there at the health department in Forsyth County. And so I am familiar with the landscape and particularly with the community that this particular initiative focuses on, which is East Winston. Um, Place Matters has a special place in my heart because I believe this is how work ought to be done. When I was at the health department working in public health, we often talked about how do we have people or help people become engaged in their own outcomes. And Place Matters is just that, where people, the community is taking an active role in developing solutions to issues that they have identified, not where we've come in and said, listen, this is what's wrong with your community, and um, this is how we decide to fix it. But we do know that when you have community solutions that are truly impactful, they have to have community involved in them. And so let's go to the first slide if we could, Cedric. And so if we look at this slide here, we'll get it pulled up. And so you'll excuse us. We are working between High Point and Winston-Salem. I'm here in my dining room. Well, not even High Point and Winston-Salem. Cedric's actually over in Adams Farm. So, but if we look here at this slide, and some of you may be familiar with this slide, it's this image that probably popped up about 10 or 15 years ago, particularly as we started talking about the social determinants of health. And in this picture, you have three children looking over into a soccer game. And what we see happening there is that they each have a box, and that's what we call equality. And so the assumption is that everyone benefits from the same supports, and this is equal treatment. What we know, though, just from even looking at this picture, is that this doesn't work. And so you see the little guy there in the yellow shorts. Even with his box, he still can't see over into the playing field. And so he can't be a part of the action. And so for a long time, this is how we've done our work. We've said that, listen, we want to make sure that we are providing everyone with the same kind of resources. And what we've learned is that that isn't good for everyone. That's called being fair. I remember when I interviewed, um, my supervisor now said the only thing that's fair is the weather. And how we treat people isn't necessarily, if we treat people the same, that isn't being fair because it's not addressing their different and unique needs. And so if we look at the next slide, and this is really what happens with Place Matters, it's a paradigm shift. And so it's a way of doing work that is very different than we've done it in the past. And so if we look at this next image, what we've done is that guy on the end in the blue pants, we took his box away, and we gave the fellow there in the yellow shorts, we gave him two boxes. And so now he can see. And so this is what we call equity. And so this is our equity model. Everyone gets the supports that they need. And this is a concept, really, you could akin it to affirmative action. But by providing people with the resources that they identify and the resources that they need, we're moving into a shift that really is more representative of equity. You know, I oftentimes, whenever I do this presentation, I'm talking to a group of parents. I'll say, you know, it's just like when you have children. We recognize that our children have unique needs. And so what we do for one, we may not do for the other because we know that this one needs this particular support. And so this is where um, our work in Place Matters, where it's different than work that we've previously done, even at United Way. And so what we've done here is that we recognize the unique needs of the Northeast Winston community. and we are working with that community to address those needs. And so you're going to hear me throughout this presentation oftentimes say with rather than for, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to work with community rather than working for a community or doing to a community. And so this is really an exercise where we're going in and want to be real partners. The last slide that we're going to see here, and I'm going to click on my end too so I can see it, is the one that talks about justice. And so what we've done here is that we were able to actually take those supports away because we removed the barrier that was keeping these 3 young people from all being fully engaged in the game on the other side of the fence. And so this is where we get into justice. And so now all 3 can see the game without supports or without accommodations. The causes of the inequity were addressed, and the systemic barrier it's cut off down at the bottom, but it says the systemic barrier has been removed. And that's what we're trying to do with our Place Matters work. We are partnering with community, doing work with, including them in the process, really from identifying issues at the very beginning to vetting those issues through our Resident Impact Council, and then even making decisions about where funding will land in their community. And so that's really what makes Place Matters unique in how we do our work. There, if we look at the next one, this next slide here, let me just kind of tell you where Place Matters is, where Place Matters happens. And so if you look at this map, I always think it looks kind of like a capital J. And we start, or the Place Matters footprint is made up of 13 neighborhoods, and those 13 neighborhoods comprise roughly around 5,500 people. And then there's an area of influence that goes around that community, and that's about another 5,000 people. So roughly, there are about 10,000 people who are part of our Place Matters intervention in Northeast Winston. But our footprint starts very close to the intersection of Martin Luther King and New Walkertown Road. It continues up New Walkertown up to Northampton, and it curves off back around Carver School Road. And so those 13 neighborhoods, you have Northwoods Estates, Monticello Park, Ebony Hills, Prospect Park, Wildwood Park, Cardinal Acres, Castle Heights, Spalding Drive, Eastgate Village, Lakeside, Dreamland, Bowen Park, and Ladera Crest. And so, and it's a mix of neighborhoods. You see mixed income in those communities. And so our communities up what I like to call in the capital J, the line at the top of the capital J, Northwoods Estates, Monticello Park, Ebony Hills, those communities are a little more well established. Around the crook of the J, Ladera Crest, Bowen Park, those communities are a bit more fragile. And so, but it's that combination of these mixed incomes, these mixed resources that really make for a strong project, because Place Matters at its very core is asset-based, and our community is the biggest asset in doing the work that we do. And so we right now are in the first year of the second investment cycle of Place Matters. And so our first investment cycle was 3 years, and that began around 2016. 2015-16, right there. And then we were able to fund 22 programs to do work in the 4 priority areas that were identified as major concerns through our community assessment in the Place Matters footprint. And right now we're in the second investment cycle. United Way and its leadership made a commitment to provide 25% of its allocable dollars to do work in the Place Matters footprint. And so we have held true to that. We've also held true to the basic tenet that it is going to be resident-led. And so the work that we do in Place Matters is work that the residents, through the community assessment and through the Resident Impact Council, have told us they want to see done. And so for this current investment cycle, that means that we're focusing on housing, education, healthy living, and unemployment and underemployment. One of the other keys to this work is that the work has to happen in the Place Matters footprint. An agency that's funded may not necessarily be located in the Place Matters footprint in these 13 neighborhoods, but the work that they do does have to happen in those Place Matters, in those 13 neighborhoods. Let's see the next slide there, Cedric. So I want to talk to you for just a moment about just why place work is so important. Because ultimately, Place Matters is, the matters part is a play on words. And so it's not only place matters as in substance, but it's also in intent. And where a person lives, where a person grows up, ultimately really determines their outcome in life. And so if we look here, this is the difference that 5 miles makes. And so if you look to the far right of our image there, the average household income of a child of low-income parents who grew up in this area, and this is the Place Matters footprint that points to that area that is in the black highlighted area. But the average household income of a child of low-income parents who grew up in this area and is now in his or her mid-30s is just $17,000, and that's the lowest 1 percentile in the whole country. But if you go just 5 miles away, so 5 miles on the other side of Winston-Salem in Forsyth County, the average household income of a child of low-income parents, still low-income parents, who grew up in this area and is now in his or her mid-30s is $45,000, which is in the 90th percentile of the country. And so it's amazing the difference that just that 5 miles makes. And so, and that's the disparity, of course. You know, when I worked at the health department, I worked for a long time in infant mortality, and we had done some work down in Mississippi, and one of the mayors of one of the small towns that I had reached out to as we were talking about infant mortality, particularly in the Southeast, had described a disparity as a difference that ought not be. And that's exactly what you're seeing here. And so there's absolutely no reason that a child who grew up only 5 miles away from the other side of Winston-Salem is in the lowest 1 percentile in the country in terms of economic outlook, whereas on the other side of the city, really, you can see that this child is now in the 90th percentile. And so we want to address those issues. And our community assessment and our impact council, they've told us these are important to us and we want to be a part of the solution. And so we, in our work with Place Matters, are working to change that disparity, to address those issues around healthy living, around housing, around education, and around unemployment and underemployment and economic mobility, to the extent that there is no longer this great disparity just 5 miles apart in the same city. Let's look here at the next one, Cedric. And so the question is, why does United Way focus on place matters and strengthening neighborhoods? Because what we realized, and I can't say we because I wasn't there, but what our leadership had the foresight to see is that we had to make a paradigm shift if we really want to see change at a community level. And so I misquoted every time I start talking about it, but a rising tide raises all ships. I believe that's what it says. And so if we really want to see our community prosper, we have to help those who are really struggling. And Place Matters addresses those issues by recognizing the unique and different needs of community and making sure that there are resources in place and that there are partnerships in place to address those. And so we believe that our entire community is better off when all of its neighbors and neighborhoods are healthy and thriving. We also believe that resident solutions are more sustainable in the long run. I tell a story about a community garden over in Cleveland Homes. And so this was now probably about 7 or 8 years ago, but there was a city councilwoman, excuse me, let me drink this record. City councilwoman who was over in Cleveland Homes and saw that there was this big empty space, and she thought, wouldn't this be a great place to put a community garden? And she called the city down. They helped to build these raised beds, and the garden started to grow. She lost interest in it, and so about a year after the garden had been out there, she had lost interest. And maybe about a year later, I was over there in Cleveland Homes, and I saw the overgrown area, and I asked the community manager, what happened, and she told me the story. She's like, the city councilwoman, she came over here and built this garden, but she didn't talk to any of their residents about it, and they didn't have an interest in it. And so I believe on our end, we all can see the importance of community gardens, particularly in addressing food security issues. But that wasn't an issue that that community had identified, and they didn't take it on as a project of theirs. And so it grew up and grew to the point where they eventually just cleaned the whole area up. And so we believe that community solutions, if they're going to be effective, need community support and community buy-in, and that's why we do the work that we do, the way that we do it in Place Matters. Right there in red, I think that's so important, that's why I put it in red. We are doing with rather than for, and so that's critical to this. And that right there is the story of that community garden. That city council person was doing for rather than working with those community members to see what their real needs were, where their real interests lie, and she was doing for rather than doing with. We also believe that by focusing on asset-based community development, by leveraging the gifts, the skills, and the talents of the residents who live in these communities, that we can create lasting and sustainable community change. And so right now we are in the second year, the second investment cycle of Place Matters. But we're not going to always be there, because we hope that the work that we're doing, the partnerships that we're forming, that eventually we will be able to leave and these communities will be able to sustain the momentum and continue the good work that has been started. And we're also developing relationships with new collaborative partners, including the residents, new nonprofit organizations, and the faith-based community. And so, and we really thank Cedric for the tireless work that he has put in to making sure that our connections with the faith community are lasting and true. Cedric's position was part of our first cycle, and we saw a need then, and things happened, and we no longer had a faith-based engagement coordinator, but we saw that that need still existed, and that our faith community is so very strong, particularly in Northeast Winston, in East Winston, that we're like, we've got to get a faith-based engagement coordinator back in here, because this work is too critical. The connections that happen in the faith community are too important for us not to take advantage of. And so we brought that position back on board. And I think here too, it's also important to point out that one thing that makes Place Matters unique from our community-wide investment is that Place Matters is the only entrance for agencies who are not our traditional partners to come into our United Way investment. And so on our community-wide side, we have about 34 traditional partners, and those have been partners for years. But on Place Matters, it's also a place where new nonprofits who aren't our traditional partners are able to come into our investment and learn to, of course, learn the way that we do things in terms of developing successful deliverables and objectives, but also to take advantage of the resources that being a United Way funded agency provides. Let's see here. There, I'm going to move to the next slide. There. And so let's talk about what some of our results have been. And so last year, United Way's Place Matters work, we invested in 21 programs that focus on strengthening those 13 neighborhoods in Northeast Winston. And in just their second year of funding, these programs served over 12,000 combined residents. In 2019, 72% of the students receiving support from our Place Matters programs improved their academic performance and learn new skills. And this one, I'm going to talk a little bit more about later on in the presentation, but particularly around housing. And so since funding began, 9 new homes have been built in the Bowen Park neighborhood because of our partnerships with Liberty East, Experiment in Self-Reliance, and with Habitat. And what is amazing about this is that these are the first new homes to be built in this community in over 50 years. And so I encourage you all, if you're tired of being quarantined in the house, and Lord knows I am, I'm always looking for some reason to drive around and just get out of the house. But I encourage you to drive over through Bowen Park and down Ansonia and Manchester and see some of the new builds that have happened because of the Place Matters work there and because of our partnership with these amazing community partners. We just did a housewarming back in, I think, November. And I believe in the other part of the presentation, I actually have a picture that I'll show to you. And so over 10,000 residents received support to live a healthier life, including making sure they had a medical home, receiving counseling service, having access to healthy food, and learning how to cook healthy food. And also through our supportive skills development programs, 25 residents facing barriers to employment, including substance abuse and even a criminal record, they were able to get a job within 90 days of completing the program. And finally, through our partnership with Catholic Charities Stay the Course program, 30 local students facing challenges that could have prevented them from staying in college were able to continue to stay in college, and 10 of those students actually received their diploma. And so it's amazing. I'm so excited to be a part of the work that we do in Place Matters and our Place Matters footprint. And it's amazing just how impactful this work really is. Let's go to the next one, Cedric. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I want to take you into a deeper dive of understanding our investment process. And so and here specifically, we're going to talk about housing. And so our housing investment is the most recent one that we've, I guess, made come all the way through in terms of kind of finalizing. So I want to walk you through just what the investment side of Place Matters looks like. And so if we go to the next slide, so we can see what's happening there. And so here I want to talk just about talk some about our housing priority. And I've included up here on the right-hand side of the screen, still for you to see that this work around housing is happening in our Place Matters footprint in those 13 neighborhoods. And then of course there are our logos. And so we'll go to the next one. So let me just give you a quick background on the housing priority. And so prior to each investment cycle, we conduct a community assessment. And I'm not going to say a community needs assessment because we don't just find out about their needs whenever we conduct this assessment, but it's really going from door to door and asking questions about community. And I would be remiss to also, if I didn't mention that Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods is one of our foundational partners. And Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods, really, they are kind of our feet on the ground, particularly when you think about this community assessment. So they help to make sure that this happens. And they also provide tremendous support in our resident engagement efforts. But once we conducted that community assessment, we found out that majority of residents in the Place Matters footprint are homeowners. And so 56% of the people who live in the Place Matters footprint own their homes. We only have a few apartment communities, Ladera Crest, let's see, Lakeside, and I knew if I tried to name them, I wouldn't be able to name them. But we only have a few sole apartment communities. The rest are homeowners or actually renting homes. The majority of residents report being satisfied with their neighborhoods. And so the goal of Place Matters isn't to go in and start moving people out of the places they've called home for years. We want to work with them to help make their communities better. and approximately 50% have no immediate plans to move from the community in the next 2 years. So we found that through our community assessment. But we also learned that there is still concern with depreciating property values, poor property conditions in terms of existing housing stock and vacant lots, and the lack of meaningful and substantive opportunities for economic mobility. And so as a result of what we learned through the community assessment, conversations, anecdotal conversations, our resident impact council, they prioritized the issues that have been identified as part of the assessment. And they told us that housing was the #1 priority and what we wanted to focus our attention on. And so that's what we're going to look at here, exactly how we focusing our attention on that work. So how do we go from the findings in the community assessment to actually seeing an investment that's on the ground running? Let's move to the next one, Cedric. I'm going to move Cedric's picture here so that I can read up there. So, and this number is incorrect. It should say 9. So investment results to date, 9 new homes have been built in the Bowen Park neighborhood because, as I mentioned earlier, those partnerships with Liberty East, Experiment Self-Reliance, and Habitat for Humanity. And these, as I said earlier, the first new homes that have been built in this neighborhood in over 50 years. You think about all of the new construction that we see in so many different parts of our community. And yet this one community over in Northeast Winston sat stagnant for 50 years without any new builds happening there. And we all know the importance that housing brings to a community and to its family. And so you want to see that kind of growth happening. Of these new homeowners, 2 of them were also disabled veterans. Because of the work that we've done in housing, 62 senior citizens in the Place Matters footprint were able to remain in their homes because of our aging in place interventions. Now, aging in place, those are those rehab and repair interventions that without them, a senior citizen may very well have to leave their house. And so there was one story, and our partner primarily in this work has been Winston-Salem State and Habitat for Humanity in terms of identifying those seniors and then doing those home rehabs and repairs. But one of the things that we learned as we were involved in this work, there was one senior who she never went into her kitchen because there was a slope that from the rest of the house that went into the kitchen, and she was in a wheelchair, and when she rolled into the kitchen, she couldn't roll herself out because the slope was just so great from the rest of the house into the kitchen. There was another senior citizen, and she said that she moved her couch in her living room from one spot to another based on whether or not it was raining. If it rained, she had a leak in her roof, and it would rain, and it would leak into her living room, and she would have to move her couch to avoid the rain. And that's no way for a senior to have to live after they've done so much, and now in these as they're prepared for retirement, they have to deal with these issues in their home. And so 5 veterans had critical repairs done to those homes. We call critical repairs those that are greater than $2,500. And more than 25 residents in the Place Matters footprint gained skills to make minor repairs to their home. And then 8 residents were identified and employed as construction apprentices. And so, and you're going to see that apprentice piece pop back up when we start talking about some of the objectives of our new investment, because our investment council, our investment resident impact council, they told us that we want to see new builds and home repairs happening in the Place Matters footprint. And we'd like to see people who live here do it. And so we included that as part of our deliverables in this new investment. Let's move to the next one, Cedric. There, and so I included this slide, one, because I think it's a pretty darn good picture of me. But this is the most recent housewarming that we did. And this mother here, she's a mother of 4. And this is the very first time that she and her children have had a home of their own. And Habitat, of course, coordinated. It's one of our Place Matters funded houses, and they asked if I would come out and present the homeowner the key to her new home. And I was so thrilled to be a part of the day. It was a beautiful day back in November. It was good and cold, but it was a beautiful day, and she was just so excited to be moving into a home of her own. This was not only the first time they had a house of their own, but the first time that her children would also have a bedroom of their own too. And so it really was impactful and very moving to be a part of that day. It is one of the first two-story builds that I've seen Habitat do. And so I was talking to Mike Campbell, their ED. Mike is in that first frame in the background there. And I said, Mike, I've never seen a two-story Habitat house. And he said, we don't always have the lot size to do a two-story home. And he said sometimes they don't always have the family size that necessitates this build. But this lot did provide them the ability to build a two-story home. And one of the homeowner's cousins was there, and she called it the Mansion on Manchester. And so that's what the hashtag is down there on the bottom. And so it's over off of Manchester over in Boyne Park. And so a beautiful day for a beautiful family. Yeah, let's go to the next one, Cedric. And so here you can see kind of well, not kind of, really the overview of our investment. And so you'll excuse me for reading to you, but it says United Way of Forsyth County is committed to continuing, sustaining, and expanding its impact in the Place Matters footprint through renewed investment in this change momentum. And so we've been very excited about the work that had happened already up to this point in our housing investment, and we want to continue that good work. So by aligning and advancing our goals around newly emerging national housing priorities to include the 3 Ps, and it's protecting tenants and homeowners through rights awareness and advocacy, preserving existing units through intentional remediation and supporting affordability, and producing more housing stock to meet the demand. And we endeavor to foster a better quality of life for our neighbors in the Place Matters community. I bolded and capitalized our, because we're all a part of the same community. As I was saying earlier, I live here in High Point, but the majority of my day and the majority of my time really is spent in East Winston and in Winston-Salem. And so I've developed a passion for the people there and for that community. And so, and we know that when some of us succeed, all of us can, of course, succeed. So thank you. Let's move to the next one. So our Place Matters work, in particular the work that we're talking about right now, is part of United Way's efforts to create a thriving community. And so as we move forward in our strategic plan, we as an agency, United Way as an agency, is endeavoring to create a thriving community by addressing households and by addressing neighborhoods. And the Place Matters work is the work that we are engaging in to address the creating thriving neighborhoods. If we look at the next slide, we can look at this in just a little bit more detail. And so the ultimate outcome of our housing work is that the civic neighborhoods, physical appearance, and structures will be, excuse my finger, I was just moving the thumbnail so I could read, will be enhanced and lead to improved health and safety, increased property values, and better quality of life. What I haven't mentioned up to this point, and you'll excuse me, is civic. And so civic is it's the name that the Resident Impact Council gave their work. And so civic is an acronym, and so it's community voices impacting change. And that's incredibly important because it talks again about the importance of community solutions, of course, needing community support. Let's go to the next one, Cedric, and we'll look at some of our objectives. And so the proposed goals, and I'm going to move this just a bit. So the goals of our work here are, particularly around housing, to develop or build 10 newly constructed homes in fragile neighborhoods, and additionally home ownership for 5 families. Let's close that. families throughout the footprint through means to include financial literacy, training, estate planning, etc. We also want to repair or modify homes to promote safe, up to code, and continued occupancy with a projection of 100 residences served. Increase apprenticeship opportunities to reach 25 individuals related to skills development and training in the building trade, and to increase residents' knowledge and awareness of legal issues related to tenants' rights, estate planning, civil housing matters, predatory lending, and financial services and parent education rights. And so those last two bullets, our resident impact councils really said we want to make sure that we focus on these, and so that these are included here. Not on the apprenticeship piece, to make sure that we carve out a place in our house to include an opportunity for apprentices to be a part of that work, and to take what they've learned and it creates some meaningful employment. But they also told us that, listen, there are some legal issues that happen in our community every day that affect housing, and we want to make sure that it's also a part of the work that we're doing in the Place Matters footprint. Let's go to the next one, Zed. So our focus communities are Bowen Park, Castle Heights, and Dreamland Park. So we want to see all of our footprint thrive, but we recognize the unique needs in these communities. So Bowen Park, the 9 homes that I had mentioned earlier, those 9 homes were built in Bowen Park, and we recognize that we can't just do one-off work if we want to make a real impact in the community. And so we need to continue building to strengthen the economic footprint of that Bowen Park community. Castle Heights is one of our focus communities here, also because Castle Heights has a very active neighborhood association, and they have been incredibly diligent in taking a leadership role in addressing the housing needs in their community. They have been able to purchase a home and flip it and sell it back to one of their neighborhood members who was renting, and they want to continue doing more of that work, and we want to support them there. And then also there is some really exciting work going on at the city level that's happening over in Dreamland Park. And Dreamland Park is in our footprint, and we want to be a part of that too. And so those are our focus communities. And I think I only have a couple more slides here. Oh, well, you know what? I didn't have just one more. But Cedric, actually take me back just one more slide if you could, before we look at that, because I do want to, when we talk about these focus communities, as I said earlier, we want to see all of the Place Matters footprint thrive. These 3 communities, Bowen Park and Dreamland Park in particular, represent 2 of our more fragile communities or neighborhoods in the Place Matters footprint. And so that's why there's particular attention on the work that is happening there. Because we do know that if we can affect change at this level, hopefully we can see a greater economic mobility outlook for the entire footprint. And so I hope what you've seen there is I've walked you from the community assessment piece at the beginning to vetting by the Resident Impact Council to working with the Resident Impact Council to develop goals and objectives, and then ultimately how that looks in terms of when we make our investment. And so at this point, another slide here might actually show you what's going on now. And so we have made decisions around, we received applications, or let me back up, we received letters of intent. We received applications for our housing priority, and we've actually made some funding decisions. And we will announce soon publicly where we are funding those dollars to address the housing issues in the Place Matters footprint. And so now I think, Seth, we can go to the next slide. And so, and there you see, that's my contact information, rod.smith@uwforsyth.org. My phone number. You can also find me Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, until such time as we get back over to Winston Towers, sitting at my dining room table in front of my Chromebook. There. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Cedric, and I think Cedric's going to talk just a bit now about maybe some more examples specifically about how the work that we've done has been impacted by our connections with the faith-based community.
Yes. Thank you, Rod, for that information. And I know we'll have a brief time at the end for Q&A. We do have a few, or at least one question in the chat box. So if you have a question that we can get to, drop it in the chat box, as well as when we have our Q&A. You're more than welcome to ask that question at that time. So one of the key things, again, in doing this work, and especially during this season that we're in terms of COVID-19, we've been able to see just great collaboration and partnerships come together where maybe in the past that wasn't happening as much. And so one of the great things with the faith community, we saw individuals and organizations step up, the Ministers Conference, Love Out Loud, and other churches and community partners to do things like food distribution. And if you know anything about it, it takes a lot of organization and bandwidth to pull something like that off for over 2 months now. And so we were able to connect with Life Changing Transformation Church, Pastor Alice Mitchell. She was basically one of the first in the first phase, if you will, to come on board to help with that work. And also the Ephesus Seventh-day Adventist Church right off of Cleveland Avenue. And they've been able to do the work of food distribution for about 2 months now. Love Out Loud has also provided masks to the community, as well as something that kind of goes unnoticed. There was a very high need of feminine hygiene products, and that was expressed through these churches and community partners, and we were able to partner with the Diaper Bank of North Carolina to help meet some of those needs as well. And so as this work continues to expand, there will always be a need for spaces available within the Place Matters footprint, churches that may be in the footprint, as well as volunteers who may want to come in the community and to help around those core priority areas of education, housing, economics, as well as healthy living. And so before this situation, we were also having some one-on-one meetings. And so there are a couple ways, if you're interested in helping, we can continue that in terms of having that formal introduction about the faith work and an interview process of where your church may be located and some of the things that you may be able to help assist with, as well as our pastoral or faith advisory council. We're looking for individuals who may be interested in that as well. And I do think the great part of this work is going to be not just with the leadership, but also the faith community in terms of the members of each particular faith organization. We're working on another piece to engage, almost like an action team, so that we can actually get things done on the ground, if you will. And so that's kind of the work. I'll again put that, share my screen one more time for those who weren't with us at the beginning.
There you go.
Yep, so I'm gonna hopefully close this out. Give me 1 second. Close that out. This up. There we go. And share my screen. All right. So again, the whole point of the faith work, or how we are organizing our work, is around the spectrum. Again, informing, consulting, involving, collaborating, and then empowering. And we know that each organization is different. There may be some who are further along the spectrum, and that's okay. There may be some at the beginning phase. We want you to be comfortable in whatever phase that you're in, and we want to be able to support the work that your organization is doing, as well as the work that we're doing in the Place Matters footprint, and more details in terms of definitions for these terms as well to come. And I can email them to you as well. So at this time, we do have one question out there, and this is maybe something you can answer, Rod. This is from Mrs. Camille Roddy. It says, are there plans at this point to delve into opportunity zones and to work with churches and organizations such as Self-Help Credit Union for housing related development?
Get this back up here, I'm sorry. We haven't discussed working necessarily within the opportunity zones. However, with those partners who are at the table in our housing work, they have a number of resources at their disposal, some of which really deal with financial literacy, creditworthiness, and training. And they do take advantage of those to make sure that community members are connected with them.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions? And if you do have a question, if you could just tell us your name and which organization you're representing before your question, please. All right.
Oh, do you see any in the chat?
Yep, no, just one. Don't be shy.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Any questions specifically for the faith-based work?
No, Cedric, perhaps what you could talk about is that this is kind of like our introduction to the faith-based work. And so Cedric does have plans going forth where I'm thinking did we call them front porch conversations?
Yes.
Okay. And so those kind of community conversations that will continue around various topics with the particular emphasis on how the faith community can be involved. And so this today, what we've done really is an opportunity to learn more about Place Matters, kind of its history and the work that we're currently involved in, and how the faith-based piece is connected to that, and really how we are hoping to integrate the faith community into our work. But going forth, we will have other conversations with the community on a variety of topics that I believe really the community may decide what those topics will be, and specifically how the faith community can become involved and engaged in those topics.
Awesome. And just to kind of tag that, Rod, so the whole idea and concept around the front porch meetings. So basically, if you think about our neighborhoods from the past, 20 or 30 years, you saw individuals engaging on their front porch. Everyone knew everyone. You couldn't go down the street without, somebody knowing who you were. And if you weren't doing something that you were not supposed to be doing, before you got home, your mom or your grandparents, they knew what happened. And so, in watching a documentary one time on some of the issues within the urban community, one individual pointed out he thought the way to basically help in the solution was to build front porches again. And so we want to take that theme and really bring that to you as an analogy, but more so in practice as we do this work together to build that front porch to where we can address as a community some of the needs in the community, as well as the faith-based work and engagement as well. So that whole analogy of a front porch as being the place of gathering to maybe help move the needle on some of these issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I do see a comment in the chat saying, asking about owner. Is the person titled owner, is she a resident, or do you have any comments? This is from Mary Clark.
I'm sorry, say it one more time, said folks, the question.
So the question is, does the person, I guess they don't have the name, this is from Mary Clark, that has the name owner, a resident owner, or does she have any comments? So.
Well, you know what? Mary is actually on the call. Mary, could you tell us exactly what you mean?
Well, I saw the name owner, and you also mentioned the houses that were built, and I was wondering if this was a resident owner of one of the new homes, and I would be interested in hearing from somebody from the community with their input about what's going on in the community.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? That would be, and you know, that might be a great topic for a future future webinar. You know, if we continue to do this kind of engagement to bring in some of those people who live in the communities, whether they're resident owners or tenants even, right, to hear what their thoughts about some of the changes that are happening in their community. Right. And so, you know, we've heard, we just have kind of anecdotes in terms of the relationships that we have with our Resident Impact Council, and just in terms of the work that we do there through our partners. And so I can tell you what our Resident Impact Council told us is that they're very excited about the work that is happening in all of the priority areas. And so housing, education, healthy living, and unemployment and underemployment. They are also really excited that they are a part of the solution and that they make decisions. And so I know we're not using the word empower anymore, and I never can think of the term that we use when we don't use empower. But they are taking ownership of the direction of life in their communities. And so our Resident Impact Council, they help to make, or they make our funding decisions about where funding will go, which partners will be funded, which partners will be defunded. And it even helps to hold our partners to a higher level of accountability. I had one Resident Impact Council member who told me that she participates in some of the programs that we fund so that she can make sure that the people are doing what they said they were going to do. And so it's really awesome that they have that level of engagement, that they feel this level of ownership of this work. And so at some time, it would be nice to bring in those owners, those homeowners, to see it, to make, or to bring those homeowners in so they can talk more about how their community is changing because of home ownership and how their lives have been changed really because of home ownership too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mary.
Right. Any other questions? I also know. Yes.
This is Camille Wright again. I couldn't type as fast as I wanted to. Have you all received any feedback or input from Winston-Salem and Forsyth County schools, and as far as where things are now with COVID-19 and the school year and student success, particularly in the Place Matters imprint, and what needs there are for the churches to step in and perhaps bridge some gaps over the summer for learning so that African American and Hispanic kids are, you know, not so far behind when they start the school year again in the fall. Any conversations about any of that?
Camille, there have been conversations about students who never connected to the resources, who I guess never were able to get connected with the online learning. Those are happening outside. I don't want to say they're happening outside of Place Matters, because Place Matters is right in the middle where we see a lot of those students who aren't necessary, who did not, were not able to be connected. And so we are currently in conversation with the superintendent, with schools in the Place Matters footprint, and with some of our community partners to see how we can address those issues. We are actually, Debbie and Charmaine and I had some conversation this morning about how do we work with community partners to make sure that through the services that we fund, that we're able to make sure those students are connected over the summer and going up into the school year. And so there haven't been any final decisions made yet. I think that like a lot of us, we are now realizing that as the school year draws near an end, that many students weren't able to connect, and that we are going to have to go through some different channels to make sure that if and when the school year starts back in August, that those students are ready to start pick up where they left off. And so right now we don't have any real answers about what our process is going to look like, or really what the school system's process is going to look like.
Awesome. Thank you, Rod. This meeting is also being recorded, so I will send it out if you're interested as well in having this recording, and we'll hold it for a few more seconds, and if not, then we will kind of close it out. And we really appreciate you joining us today. Miss Debbie, do you have anything to add, or?
Just if I could share a little bit about the question around education. Rod was right on. Camille, we just had a conversation with Dr. Harrison yesterday about what the school system's looking to do. I think many of you probably saw the announcement in the paper from Sunday that they were receiving some CARES funding to launch this summer Jumpstart program. So we were trying to get an understanding of what they're looking to do specifically to tap into the children that had not been connected. We know that the Jumpstart program is targeting 7,000 students. We know that they are looking to engage community resources to support the wraparound work, because it will be, I think the plans now are that any work that they offer during the summer, and I think the time period is late, the time period is in July, they would appreciate support from wraparound community-based programs, and certainly locations within communities that are walkable for students, like community centers or churches. Don't know much more beyond that, but they are also looking at a model that would engage tutors that can support, as I mentioned, and augment the work that the Jumpstart program will be doing. Jumpstart, from what I understand, is not specifically only targeting those that had not been engaged in e-learning, but the students that also had been identified through mid-year reporting that they need additional support. So if we can identify ways that we within the Place Matters footprint can engage, we will certainly let you know. I do know, I can share, we will be reaching out. We did receive some information about by school and by geography where there are hotspots of students that had not connected. One of those locations that is a Place Matters focus for us is Carver. So we will be connecting to see what can be done in terms of the work we're doing to support the Carver students. And we can certainly let you know as we continue to find out more. And thank you, Cedric, and thank you, Rod, for putting this together and doing a great job. And thank all of you for supporting the work that we're doing in Place Matters.
Thank you, Debbie.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Debbie. And if there are no more questions, we will be consider ourselves dismissed. And thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to doing this again. I will email the presentation out for those who are interested. And if you need to contact me, you have my email address. And we look forward to doing this again very soon. So
Awesome.
You guys have a great day. Be safe and stay healthy.
Thank you, Cedric. Take care.
All right, you too. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.